want to welcome Sheena Burrell, the Deputy Chief Information Officer at the National Archives and Records Administration. She's also a volunteer with Young FCA and ACT-IAC. And on top of that, she's a mother of two interesting kids who are STEM oriented and looking forward to their careers already. And just, Sheena, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Jeremy, for having me.
So for those who have not met you or had a chance to interact with you like I did when we did Partners Together, share a bit about yourself, where you're from, what you do. Yeah, let's hear a bit about you.
Okay, a bit about me. I am from Baltimore, Maryland. Actually, I will say I'm from Baltimore through the Army. So I was born in the Army in Fort Rucker, Alabama. My dad was in the military, so we did move around a lot. But I claim Baltimore because my parents are both from here. And I do live close to Baltimore. My background, I actually wanted to be a fashion designer. It's so funny. I wanted to be a fashion designer and I wanted to live in New York. I don't know how many people have watched The Devil Wears Prada, but I was like, I want to be that girl. And I actually saw that movie after I lived in New York and after my stint there. But I lived in New York for a while and I went to college there for 2 years before transferring back here to Maryland. I went to college for communications, which is definitely not STEM related at all. And I can tell you, like, I didn't even grow up having a thought that I would be within information technology as my career. If you would have asked me a couple of years ago, not even a couple of years ago, way longer than a couple. I clearly think I'm younger than I am. But if you would have asked me before, I would have definitely told you I would have lived in New York for the rest of my life, worked for a fashion magazine or something like that, something super, super cool at that time. But now, as I've gone through my career and I've moved here to Maryland, working very close to DC and working in DC, my career path really kind of took a turn as I worked for Social Security Administration for about 15 years. I worked there and I was working there even while I was in New York. I worked in 26 Federal Plaza for those who are in New York, and we did like these fire drills for 9/11 at the time. So it was like a very cool experience. But I worked in the Social Security Administration there as well as here in Maryland. And as I was working there, I worked in the CIO's office. And there were people who were like, I was a policy analyst and they were like, you should take these classes. I think you would be really good at it. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. And I was taking more and more of these IT classes. I would take in project management for IT, or I would take just agile development when agile just like first came out. And I would keep taking all of these classes and I kept progressing in my career in IT in the CIO's organization. And I became like this go-to person for our investment process at SSA. And I was then asked one day to do a kind of like a benchmarking session with NASA. And I was like, what is NASA going to learn from SSA? And so they came in, we went to NASA, we talked about our investment process, establishing a project management office for IT at NASA, and what we did at SSA and how I established those at SSA. And they were like, well, could you come do that here at NASA? And so I had this wonderful opportunity to work at NASA. And when I got there, I was like, wait, I need to do some deep dives because I don't really understand it. Like I grew up at SSA, worked there for 15 years while I was a student in college. And I knew only the cool stuff about NASA, like going into space and signing my name so it could be a part of the mission to Mars kind of thing. But I really needed to learn the business. And so I would around to all the NASA centers and to all their IT organizations, work with people outside of the IT organization in science, in human exploration and operations. Those are the people that actually send astronauts out into space. and working with aeronautics, all of them to really kind of understand IT from a different perspective, from a NASA perspective, because they're special. Anybody from NASA will tell you we are special. And I learned so much during my time there, and I worked there for about 3 years, and I continued to kind of grow in my career, learning more about IT, taking more classes in IT, working with other partners that are outside of government, like the Act I Act classes that I attended as well, and just kind of networked with a lot of people. So that was kind of my start in IT and kind of my career. I couldn't really do the commute anymore to NASA. It was really hard because, again, I'm from Baltimore. I live in Baltimore. And I came to the National Archives, which is in Maryland. It's in College Park, Maryland. And I came here doing the same thing, IT investment process, learning more and more about the IT world. And one day they were like, well, there's this other position. And I was like, yeah, this position sounds super technical. I'm not sure this is a good position for me, but it has been. I've really enjoyed being the deputy CIO. I've learned a lot. And it's a lot of it really was by circumstances, right place, right time, just learning different things, my network. And so that's really kind of how I got into IT and a little bit about my background.
Wow. So communications. That's actually not uncommon, but it's pretty exciting because that means you had a little bit of, I think, a broader view of the world, right? Some of us technology people, I'm a software engineer in my background. We get so focused on the technology and not necessarily maybe the people. And maybe that, I mean, does that make a difference for you in your role, especially now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think one of the things that communication has really done to help is because I've taken so many communication classes. When people talk to me and they're super technical, right? And they're explaining. Right now, we're talking a lot about the network, and I'm talking a lot about switches and routers and circuits. And I'm understanding what they're saying, but I need to take that and then explain it to somebody else to get money funding. And then one of the things I have to tell my technical people all the time is, okay, well, how does this impact the business? And my viewpoint is so different from technology that it gives a diversity of thought that they wouldn't have experienced before. One of the things that I tell people all the time when we do interview panels is make sure you have someone from the business on this interview panel and not just a bunch of IT folks. And I think that's because of my background, because I'm not I didn't grow up within IT. I don't have a computer science degree. Like I probably, sometimes I wish I did, but honestly, it helps me to, one, listen more, and to listen without the intent to speak. It's more so listening with the intent to learn, because that's not my background. But it also helps me because I'm listening with the intent to learn. I'm able to then explain it to someone else who doesn't have an IT background, because that's not my first language. That's the vernacular that I would use is different than someone who grows up within an IT. So I think those are some of the things that I think communication has helped me with. And as we talked about, as I just said, like with the interview process, having someone from the business is because they speak a different language. And they're saying, if you're coming in and you're going to build this application for me, and I need it to meet my business need, and you're looking at it from a technical perspective, you can miss some things. And so when we have these interviews for positions, I want people with a diversity of thought, who don't necessarily just think IT, but how we can move our agency forward. And because I do work for the government, how do I move my agency forward or my organization forward with the business in the forefront?
Oh, that's really, really important. When we have some people come into public sector, right, or public service, we want that to be public service, right? We're working for the taxpayer, so let's think through. It's not like we're a business where it's just a different thought approach. I think that's really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing too. one of the big things, like working at NASA, working at the Social Security Administration, and then working here, all of those public service organizations have different missions. And like I find each one of them super cool, right? And I don't know if that's the geek in me, but I will tell you that working at NASA, I was like thrilled. Who wouldn't be, right? Like we're sending people to the moon. I am on board. How can I get there? But then even coming to the National Archives, everyone was like, "You're going to the National Archives from NASA? Like, why would you leave NASA?" And when I came here, I'm so impressed with all the work that we do, and how we preserve every federal agency's records. There are records from NASA. There are pictures from NASA. There are maps from NOAA. And you get to see all of these things, and you're just like, this is amazing, and it's so cool. So I learned a lot, not only from an IT perspective, but from each of those agencies, just like how IT really affects their business and makes it better. And then from there, it's always like, well, how can I transform IT to do even more? Like, what can I do to be forward thinking and lean in to say, okay, all right, you have this process, but I can make it better if we did this. Like if we can automate this, or if I can modernize this, without losing that value, or the thing that was created for the business. So I absolutely love all of the jobs that I've been in.
Fantastic. So you've been around the block, been in IT circles for a little bit. So what is something about the way we do IT today that if you were given the power, you were brought in and said, you say it, we're going to do it. What's something you think we should consider in how we do IT today?
It honestly, that's a great question. And I wish for federal government, and I'm speaking really for the federal government, is for us to be more forward thinking, to utilize some of the things that are within private industry. I'll take COVID-19, for example, right? Or just some of these things that have happened in the world where we had to bring private industry together with government in order to make things happen. And with COVID-19, that's kind of what we did with the COVID-19 vaccine. We brought private industry together with government to make it happen. I think with the Affordable Care Act, when we had to bring private industry together to make the website for the Affordable Care Act, is all of those things is like we can get these things done if we just have that mindset. I think if I could wave a magic wand and take some of the bureaucracy out of the way that we do just different changes in the federal government or acquisitions within the federal government for IT. And I'm not saying it for everything, but specifically for IT, the way that we do acquisitions today would be one of the things that I would like to see change, because I know that we could probably do more. We could simplify business processes. We could automate them. We could, like utilize the newer technology that we haven't been using right now. I keep trying to get someone to do a blockchain proof of concept with me. Like, hey, someone, like records have to travel, right? And if they're going to travel, if it starts out with John Doe who comes into like a Social Security Administration and starts a claim or starts a file, that has to travel. And then eventually it travels to the National Archives. How can we utilize that technology? How can we start something like that? It could be as simple as with OPM, right? Where I actually feel like blockchain would be amazing. I transferred to 3 different agencies. And every time I transferred to these agencies, it seemed like I was starting over from scratch each time with my leave, with my the PIV card, with my credentialing. And it's like I'm going into the same system to type the same information that you guys probably already have on me. It really would be beneficial if you just transferred it. So I mean, from an IT perspective, from a federal government IT perspective, those are the things I would like to see. But from just an overarching perspective, I would love to see more women, young girls of color moving into the IT fields. When I say this, when I worked at NASA, sometimes I was like the only woman of color in the room. And I would love to see more women of color in the room. I have the privilege of working for a woman of color, an Indian American lady at the National Archives. And I see it every day in the way that we make decisions. It helps us to have that diversity of thought. It helps us to lead organizations. It helps so many ways that we do business to just think about things different. And I think that's my biggest thing, is to have this diversity of thought and opinion in how we do business today. I mean, I really, really do want to encourage the youth of today to really think about STEM, as well as getting into different programs for STEM. So that was my long answer, Jeremy.
Oh, that's a great answer. And it's important. I agree with you. It's totally important. We need to get more, we need to encourage youth of a variety of backgrounds and, in gender to come take part in this amazing career we have.
Yes.
So many cool things we can do, but that diversity of thought is very, very helpful. So
yes.
So where do you see yourself going? You're deputy CIO, which is amazing. What's in the future for you, or what's in the future for the kind of work you're trying to get accomplished?
So for me, as a deputy CIO, clearly the path is to become a CIO one day. So, and I hope to do that. I'm not pushing Sharnalee out. Like, if she actually looks at this podcast, I'm not pushing you out. You can stay. But that's the goal. And I see myself definitely being a CIO within the next 5 years. I also see myself not necessarily just from a role perspective, like a title perspective. I see myself being a transformational leader. That's my real goal, is to transform the way that we do IT today and think about it as a business. I see myself pushing the envelope for the federal government, and seeing, is there a way that we can do this better, faster, cheaper? That is my real goal, and where I really see myself coming up in the future. I think that's my passion, I guess. That's my passion. I think when I talked to Maria Roth one time, she just seemed super transformational to me. We were talking about her hires when she was at the SBA, and she was saying she hired all these people across the nation, and they're working for the SBA in DC. And I was like, well, how are you going to continue to do that when COVID-19 is over? Are you going to make those people, come to DC? And she was like, no, why would I? We work in IT. And it's just like, that's the kind of transformational mindset that I want us to have in government. And I want to be one of those people, those change agents that really shape the way that we do business going forward. I really do hope that we're able to do some type of work where, our smart card, our PIV cards that work for this government agency can transfer to another government agency. How might we be able to do that? How can I make something like a blockchain work for the National Archives and really be on the forefront of that? So while it is to be a CIO one day, maybe within the next 5 years, really I want to be a change agent. I want to be a transformational leader for the federal government.
And I think you will.
I hope so.
So, well, thank you so much, Sheena, for joining me today on the podcast. And I really look forward to seeing the things you bring to helping government, adopt some of those future changes.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.